The Vivo X200 Pro camera is the closest thing to a real camera. The question is, how close is it? And how much can computational photography compensate for the physical limitation of a smallest sensor? I was curious to know the answer of this question, so with Daria, we went out to shoot videos and photos using the Sony Alpha FX30 camera and Vivo X200 Pro. Let's play a game. Guess which one was taken by a Pro Sony Alpha FX30 cinema camera and which one was taken by the Vivo X200 Pro. The first shot is taken from the Vienna Opera House. You are now looking at the camera A. Let's change to camera B, which should already reveal part of the answer. Maybe some of you already have guessed which one is which. If you didn't, we can look at the second footage. This one is taken at Karlschurch in Vienna from camera A. Now, we will change to camera B. There is a slight change in angle, but I try to keep everything else the same. If you didn't guess the answer, we have a third chance. Here, I'm color grading camera A using ARRI colors, which mimic the colors of an expensive ARRI camera. Now, I'm doing the same for camera B. You probably noticed a huge quality jump from camera A to camera B. And probably you guessed it right. The first camera is Vivo X200 Pro, and the second camera is the entry-level cinema camera from Sony called FX30. Even though in wide shots during daylight or even early evening, the two cameras are pretty close in quality, when it comes to low-light situations such as late night evening, indoors, or nights, the largest sensor on a real camera makes a big difference. The other thing you would notice is that the real camera can make a better shallow depth of field and blur the background simply because of the physics and a larger sensor. So, this look is simply not achievable with a phone because we are limited to a specific aperture and light that can be gathered. Also, you may wonder why the colors on the Sony FX30 camera look so similar to Vivo X200 Pro. The reason is that I'm shooting in log. Generally speaking, the footage that comes out of almost any phone in the default mode is too vivid, over-sharpened, and has too much contrast, which makes it look too digital. Here, I shot this video using the default mode on the Vivo X200 Pro, which has all the characteristics I mentioned. Now, if I shoot the same scene in log, everything will look grayish, which leads to me not losing shadows and highlights. Therefore, I can easily change the colors of the footage because I have all the information I need. And the new footage won't look like it came out of a phone. The difference is huge if you look at the first footage next to the color graded one. Before we move to the portrait mode, I want to introduce you to two accessories you will see in this video today: Telesin grip and Telesin neck mount. I was super happy they decided to sponsor today's video since I've been using their camera gear for a long time. With the Telesin grip, you can get the same grip as a real camera on your phone, which is super handy. And you can also use the grip as a selfie stick. The real genius product is their neck mount, which lets you use your phone hands-free to take perfect point of view shots, but more to that later. Vivo X200 Pro has two large sensors. One of them is the telephoto and the other is the main sensor. Usually, the phones put a rather small and crappy sensor on their telephoto lens, but Vivo didn't do that, and the telephoto lens is quite high performance. And that's really great because you can take great portrait pictures and also city and architecture pictures with it. In portrait mode, in this low light situation, the photo in Vivo looks a bit more processed, but I really like the result, considering we are shooting at night. With the main lens, the quality is great, and I also like how much dynamic range I'm getting. There are also creative portrait modes on Vivo, which are like presets, and you can simply scroll through them to find the one you like the most. The bokeh is not as natural as a real camera, but the result is great. Maybe the only problem I have with Vivo is that the default portrait mode is too vivid, making the skin tone too yellow. When it comes to portrait videos, you can use portrait video mode to give an artificial shallow depth of field. One thing about the phone camera is that the sensor size is small. Therefore, an aperture of 1.6 on the main sensor on Vivo is more like 4.5 on my ASP-C camera, which is still impressive. But if you want to get the extra blur, use the portrait video mode on the Vivo X200 Pro. My personal preference though is not to use the portrait mode. The correct way to separate your subject from the background is to add distance between them, which will naturally create the blurred effect you are looking for. Regarding taking normal photos, Vivo X200 Pro has 3 modes. You can easily toggle between these 3 modes. The modes are Vivid, Textured, and Zeiss Natural. Vivid adds more saturation to the scene. I use Natural all the time, which leaves shadows like a typical phone camera. Textured adds more contrast to the image. As I said, I use Zeiss Natural all the time. The only exception is that I use Vivid when I want to take a picture of something colorful. That would be decorations, for example, or when I want to take pictures of food. For Textured, I only use it when I want to take pictures of buildings where extra contrast would give it a nice vibe. Even though the photos look slightly more digital, I don't mind it. It usually gives the structures a bit of a pop, something that would make sense when you are taking pictures of the architecture, and you are not trying to maximize the dynamic range and color accuracy, but rather the shape of the building. There are situations out there that bigger is not necessarily better, and having a big camera will draw too much attention. I would say street photography is where I would rather take photos with my phone. Vivo has a dedicated street photography mode that allows access through the Photo app. You can change almost any setting you want and even set presets that you can quickly switch between. You often want to take photos in street photography with the Telephoto lens, where the larger telephoto sensor on Vivo shines. I captured some gorgeous photos using a street photography mode. Hundreds of people are taking photos of the same thing, but the moment you use your camera, everybody freaks out. The other mode that I enjoyed a lot using on Vivo X200 Pro is the Telephoto macro mode. In this mode, you can take a macro shot from a distance. There is a lot of computational photography going on here to make the photos on Vivo the way they look. But low-key, I would say they are slightly better than the shot I captured using the camera and 16 to 50mm Sony G lens. You can process the image on Sony to look like the one on Vivo, but ain't anyone got time for that. When it comes to vlogging and content creation, there are two areas that using a phone is better than a camera. One of them is the stabilization, and the other one is using the selfie camera. Here I'm using the Telesin accessories to showcase both of these things. So the camera grip was just discussed can be extended nicely and easily by pulling the handle down. It does extend to 30 centimeters and is also 360 degrees rotatable. Then, you can easily attach your phone to it by putting it inside the grip. Needless to say, the bottoms stay functional. You can even use the grip as a remote Bluetooth module since it has a range of 10 meters. The selfie quality on Vivo X200 Pro is also acceptable. You can't do this with a normal camera unless you get one of those vlogging cameras like DJI Osmo Pocket. And I know that selfie camera is Daria's favorite camera on the phone. I'm here using the buttons on the grip to move between photos and videos mode, changing the exposure, zooming in and zooming out, and taking videos or capturing photos, all without the need to touch the screen. As I said, you can also use the grip on the phone normally. There is a screw on the bottom of the grip to attach it to your tripod, or in this case, to another camera. I also love that you can use half shutter, and there is a zoom rockers on the grip. It is also only 120 grams, which makes it super light. The second place a phone can be a better choice than a real camera is vlogging and stabilization. Here, I want to introduce another accessory from Telesin, a neck holder. It is a very simple but effective product. There is a magnetic holder in front that can change its angle. You can then attach your phone to the neck holder using a MagSafe ring or any MagSafe case and start vlogging. Of course, you can also change it between vertical and horizontal modes. The thing about phones is that their stabilization is superior to that of cameras. The reason is physics. Making proper stabilization on a smaller sensor is much easier than a larger one, and that's why phones have a competitive edge here. But that is not the only reason. Phones also have better processing power and crazy chipsets, so it is easier to phone to stabilize the footage on the fly. For example, suppose I want to stabilize the same video on the Sony camera. In this case, I have to either use a gimbal, which is heavy and bulky, or I need to stabilize the footage with a specific software after taking the video, which is time consuming. Thanks Telesin for sponsoring the video. Get the Telesin neck holder for taking amazing point of view shots, and use the grip to get fancy selfie stick that makes your phone close to a real camera. As I mentioned, the main difference between a camera and a phone is usually the sensor quality and also the sensor size. You can physically make the same quality when the distance between the glass and the sensor is too small. In low light situations, it is easier to differentiate between a camera and a phone. The phone footage is a bit noisier, lacks details, and is visibly lower quality. That said, with the Vivo X200 Pro, you still get a crazy good quality compared to other phones out there because of a large telephoto sensor on the phone. Regarding photos, the line is blurrier because the phone has many computational photography tricks. For instance, the phone analyzes the whole scene and makes part of it brighter if it detects certain objects or faces. And I would say the result is more impressive than you think. You can probably still tell the difference if you look closely. For example, you may notice certain green dots on the phone because of light reflection on the lens. Or maybe you do notice the image is sharper and the edges are more exaggerated. You would also notice that the phone does overexpose a bit at night, making the scene look brighter than it actually is and kind of ruining the nice vibe. For the last one, there is an easy fix. I always try to select my subject by tapping on it. Then, I would go 1 or 2 steps lower in exposure to make the whole scene darker. Then, the photos would match the real exposure of the sky better. Here, I would say the pictures are pretty close apart from the white balance. Also, maybe it is worth to compare the Vivo X200 Pro to a smaller camera like Sony ZV1 II, which I use a lot to shoot the day-in-the-life videos that I make in this channel. The Sony ZV1 II has a 1-inch sensor, which is very close to the size of the Vivo sensor. If you compare these two, you will quickly notice that the quality difference is not as noticeable. Maybe even with the processing data happening on the phone to the camera, the footage on the phone is slightly better. But let me know in the comments if I'm exaggerating. At the beginning of the video, I said that Vivo X200 Pro is the closest phone I tested to a real camera. As a proof, you can check the comparison of Vivo X200 Pro versus iPhone 16 Pro Max versus Galaxy S24 Ultra next. Thanks for tuning in to Tecmo, and I will see you in the next one.